Well, thanks very much, Ed, for your warm welcome. I too would like to start by acknowledging that we're fortunate enough to be getting together tonight on the lands of the Kaurna people and pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging. Can I acknowledge the former Premier of South Australia, the Honourable Mike Wren. It's great to see you here, Mike. In 2006, as I familiarised myself with this stat the other day, in 2006, South Australia's had, of our energy mix, all of the energy that we produced and consumed, 1% of it, 1% of it came from renewable energy. Today, that figure is 75%. And that journey began under Mike's stewardship and his enthusiasm to decarbonise the energy sector. And I think it's fair to say that Mike didn't just pursue that because of the obvious need to address climate change, but because Mike understood that this would in fact leverage South Australia's position and its economic strength into the future. And I think it serves as a rather powerful example of how state governments can lead. And in the case of South Australia, the nation will often follow. I'm here with a suite of parliamentary colleagues that, as Ed mentioned earlier, is probably too long a list to mention, but can I acknowledge you, Ed, and also Gemma, and congratulate you both on the establishment of the South Australian branch of the McKell Institute. I should also mention that Ed's dad, Steve, is here tonight, so it's good to see you, Steve. And of course, there are a number of other members of industry, the trade union movement. I should also acknowledge that there is a cross-section of political representation here this evening. So Sir William McKell is rightly remembered as one of New South Wales' most effective and consequential premiers. His was a transformative government, delivering vital social and economic reforms for his state during the dark wartime years. And his leadership was recognised in his appointment by Prime Minister Chifley as Australia's 12th Governor-General. That's an even more astonishing achievement given that McKell rose to hold the two highest offices in the land from a background of desperate poverty. His story is one of aspiration, hard graft, deep social conscience, including a core belief in workers' rights, timeless values which were integral to the Labor Party then as they are now. His industrial, social and environmental reforms, including the establishment of the Snowy River scheme, demonstrated his belief that governments are not only tasked with the here and now, but also have a duty to the future. That is a challenging responsibility, one that cannot be taken lightly. And while our values and our principles drive us, they must work in concert with wisdom, with clear-headed good judgment. This is why everyone, particularly governments, need to know that the advice they take is rigorous, transparent, and based on evidence. The stakes couldn't be higher. For our democracy to survive, let alone function, our society must agree, for the most part, upon a shared reality. There can be no stability or progress in a system governed by alternative facts. Anyone can hold an opinion, and there's no end of platforms available if you want to tell your opinion, if you want to yell your opinion. But it's something else entirely to form that opinion based on advice that is not filtered through personal taste or the blinkers of ideology. Our state has a proud history of taking big steps forward, from universal franchise to embracing renewable energy. But these changes haven't been made for the sake of it. At every turn, with every change, it is imperative that government is able to clearly identify and articulate the problem for which it proposes a fix. We faced a raft of challenges in our state and also a suite of incredible opportunities. There is more than enough to occupy any government without inventing non-issues for the sake of a self-indulgent, self-fulfilling, ideological, red media orientated argument. And that is where McKell comes in. Probably one of the most interesting, many of us have been fortunate enough to travel. One of the most interesting trips I've ever been on was in 2014. I had the privilege of travelling to the US and observing the US midterms as a guest of the Department of State. And I guess it was probably most enlightening by virtue of the fact although I'd travelled to America a million times before, I'd been on the usual route, But this trip took us outside of the big cities that you would almost always choose to go to when you go to America, and it was an amazing program. But we got to meet with a lot of people, business, industry. We spent a fair bit of time with the trade union movement over there. We spent a lot of time in right to work states, which will mean a lot to many of you in the room. And normally when you're on your way home, you're fired up. You feel amazed about the experience and everything that you've learned. But I can honestly say that on that trip on the way home, I've never been more despondent about where the world is at, particularly the US. And I remember writing down when I was making some notes on the way home. It feels like something's about to pop. Now, no one would have ever predicted what would happen in 2016. The night before the presidential election in 2016, I had a bet with someone who's actually in the room, telling them they were mad by even thinking it was a possibility that the outcome that eventuated would occur. So I'm no, prophet, but it was so obvious travelling around that country that the depth of the inequity was resulting in an anger that was bloody dangerous. And that anger, or that if not anger, that sense of frustration that the body politic no longer represented their concerns and their interests, has now manifested in a type of politics that is very difficult to explain. Now, we have not yet seen the full force of that in Australia, although there is growing evidence of it. And if we have any chance of seeking to make sure that our standard of living as a country continues to progress and that the body politic is making evidence-based decisions, it is incumbent on all of us to be able to enunciate problems and solutions to fix them that speak to people outside of venues like the one we're in now. And McKell and other institutions of their nature give us the tools and the knowledge that we need to be able to do that. It is right, South Australia finds itself in a relatively unique position today in comparison to eras past. But it's also true that inequity within our society remains on the rise. Although opportunity in South Australia is on the up, access to it isn't necessarily. And that's why agendas that are often dry and hard to generate interest in the media, such as an education, training and skills agenda, is something that we have to remain fervently committed to ensure that all of the opportunity we've got in South Australia at the moment doesn't just translate to growing wealth, but translates to growing wealth amongst as many people as possible, particularly those who have been dislocated from it in the past. And when we think about access to home ownership, when we think about where wages are going up versus where they are stagnant, we have an enormous amount of work to do. So the establishment of the McKell Institute in South Australia probably comes as one of the most timely choices that McKell has made, because we have before us all the opportunity, not just to propel the state forward, but to make sure that it transcends to people who need it most, so as to ensure that no one ever travels out of our state thinking to themselves, something's not quite right. Now, we've been able to manage that task in South Australia since 1836, probably better than most, which gives us a source of hope and confidence into the future. But to the extent that we can draw upon that experience and combine it with knowledge and evidence-based policy decision-making is something that will only be valued for many, many decades to come. So thank you to Ed and Gemma and the whole team. We look forward to working collaboratively with you. To donors in the room, cough up. And we appreciate the support and your presence here in South Australia. Thank you.